So thank you all for joining us. We are very excited today to be talking about a new initiative that we are launching from the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia. That is the Anchors for Equity initiative, and it is focused on our next Research and Action Lab collaboration. So we are really excited to have you here. And per any Fed event, if any of you have been to an event with us before, I do get to start us today with our standard Federal Reserve disclaimer that the views expressed here today are those of the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia or the Federal Reserve System. I will also let you all know, just as a point of order, that this meeting is being recorded, and that is so that we can share that for other stakeholders who are unable to attend today so that they can get information about the initiative. And with that being said, I thought we might kick off and just really quickly introduce ourselves so you know who we are. So for those of you who have not met me before, my name is Ashley Putnam. I lead our strategic initiative at the Philadelphia Fed, that is the Economic Growth and Mobility Project. We are focused on creating regions and fostering collaborations to create economic growth that is inclusive and equitable. And I have now been here for 5 years doing this work, and I'm really excited about this partnership, and particularly about the opportunity to work with my colleague, Deborah. And Deborah, I'll let you introduce yourself also.
Thanks, Ashley. Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah Diamond. I'm the director of the Anchor Economy Initiative, also in the Community Development Department at the Philadelphia Fed. The Anchor Economy Initiative launched with an Anchor Economy dashboard in November of 2022. We'll be talking more about the focus and resources of the Anchor Economy Initiative as we get into this Action Lab presentation. Back to you, Ashley.
So I'm excited today to talk to you a little bit about some of the work we had been doing at the Economic Growth and Mobility Project and how we approach this work, and then what it means for us to be collaborating across these two initiatives. But I will say this is very exciting because we really are thinking about the intersection between anchor institutions and the anchor economy and the work that I've been leading around economic growth and economic inclusion. And so Deborah and I really came together with this fundamental question, and it is the question we are here to ask you all today and for us to work towards together, which is how might we work with anchor institutions to improve labor market conditions in communities? So we've been really thinking strategically about how to leverage the work that we've done with anchor institutions, to leverage these engagements we have, to leverage the work that Deborah is doing with the Anchor Economy dashboard, and to think about how anchors might foster regional economic inclusion. And so that is really kind of the nexus of these two initiatives that have come together, the Economic Growth and Mobility Project and the Anchor Economy Initiative. We're going to talk a little bit about how we do that work, but we thought we might start with some important definitions so that you know what we mean when we talk about anchor economies and when we talk about equity. So Deborah, I'll let you tell us a little bit more about what an anchor is and what that means to us.
So when we talk about anchor institutions, we're talking about hospitals and higher education institutions, including colleges, community colleges, and universities. And we're aware that when communities work with their anchor institutions, they often are including large nonprofits, philanthropic organizations, sometimes even for-profits that are very committed to place. When we talk about the Research and Action Lab, these are all partners we'd love to see at the table, but for the purposes of this conversation and the lab, we are looking to have anchor institutions, hospitals, and universities as central players in the Research and Action Lab.
Excellent. And again, we'll be taking some questions at the end. So if you have questions about that, we're happy to engage on that. But we wanted to make sure you understand when you look at the work Deborah has led on how we define anchor institutions and the anchor dashboard, that is how we are defining anchor institutions. The second question we get asked is, how are we defining equity, right? Because this is Anchors for Equity. And we define equity as just and fair inclusion in an economy where all can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential, and in which race can no longer predict life outcomes. So we do think intentionally in our work here at the Philadelphia Fed about how race plays a role in outcomes, and we're really interested in these research and action labs at thinking about how are they specifically targeting low and moderate income communities and communities of color in the regions of these anchor institutions. And so we hope you'll be thinking about that as we move forward with this presentation. So what are we doing? What is this work? What does it mean for us to talk about Anchors for Equity and a Research and Action Lab? So I do want to take a step back and say, for those of you who haven't heard this work before, the way we have been doing our work at the Economic Growth and Mobility Project is what we call this Research and Action Lab. And this is something I wanted to take a second to talk about today so you understand what we're looking to do next. We have now had 5 Research and Action Labs in the 5 years I have been here, and we have learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work and what makes a successful lab and what really helps us move from problem to solution. So those labs are really a combination of our 2 strengths at the Philadelphia Fed. The first being research. We are, of course, an institution well known for the research that we conduct in the economy. We've also been growing some excellent strengths in qualitative research, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And we also have our function around outreach. So many of you heard about us today or heard about this initiative because of our outreach team that is really deeply engaged with the community. And the goal for us at the Federal Reserve overall is really to think about research-informed practice and practice-informed research. And so this is really a marrying of that goal and a marrying of those 2 strengths to say, how do we make sure that we are engaging in communities in ways that are community-driven, in ways that are innovative, that are thinking about solutions, and in ways that are actionable, that are moving from just talking about problems to looking at innovations and looking at things that can change the economic landscape. So some of the key elements we have learned when we look backwards and we say, what did we learn from those 5 research and action labs? What makes a good research and action lab? The first and most essential thing is having community champions. So we really look for, and note here, community champions, not just one. Particularly for these research and action labs, we are going to be asking for a minimum of 2 champions at the table. We'll talk about that a little more. But those are those people who are the connectors. They are what we often call a community quarterback. They are the person who is advocating regionally and locally on behalf of this issue, who is working to connect the dots, who is helping us convene people and bring them together, who is leading some of the conversation about the research, the problem, and how we start to think about solutions. We also know that localized research is really essential. We do produce a lot of research at the Federal Reserve that happens at a national level. That includes Deborah's Anchor Economy Dashboard, which is a really excellent tool. But we understand for us to really start to get to these problems on a regional level, we need to be really intentional about that research being local. And that includes quantitative and qualitative data. We've been thinking a lot at the Philadelphia Fed about how to engage community voice in our research and in setting the agenda. And that is something we are going to incorporate in these research and action labs, is thinking intentionally about how qualitative research and how working with directly impacted communities can inform and shape both the problem you're defining and the solution you're exploring. And finally, we think about cross-sector partnerships. If I have learned anything from my 5 years here, a little over 5 years, it is that we really need to see private, public, and nonprofit sectors engaged, convening regularly around the table and sharing a vision for where they are headed. So I know there are a few people here who may have participated in a research and action lab. We had 3 state-level labs the past 2 years after the pandemic, and we just learned a lot about how important it is to come together across sectors to share both in understanding the problem and the solution. Now, to kind of take one more step back, I've talked a lot about what a lab is. I can also tell you a little bit about what it isn't. So a research and action lab is not a single paper or a single publication. It is not a single event or a moment in time. These are really a process that we lead communities through to really help both discover and define our problem more clearly, as well as design and deliver solutions. So if you are familiar with design thinking or principles of design thinking, this comes directly from that kind of concept of design thinking. We are asking that how might we question at the beginning, thinking about how anchors can help to address these local labor market challenges. And then we will come together and sort of define around what is the problem we're addressing? What does the research say about that problem? Are we defining the problem correctly? Does the community we're trying to engage actually understand that to be the problem? And then we start to think collectively about solutions. So one important part of this is to note that this is a fairly big time commitment. So a research and action lab is an 18 to 24-month engagement. So we're looking at engaging with your community or your region for the better part of 2 years. And we really are focusing on a region or a community. And we can talk a little bit more about how we define that. We are relatively broad with what we would call a region or a community, but we have done things that are mostly at a local level, so at a county level, and possibly our cross-county level. We are looking at the specific issues of economic mobility. So in this case, we are really focused on the workforce and worker challenge. And then we think again about that localized research and partnership. So who is there in the community that we can partner with to make sure that local stakeholders are engaged, to make sure that the community's voice has been raised? How do we help to facilitate these conversations? So this is one of the things many of you have engaged with me on this work that I bring to this. We are going to be using that research to define the problem, but also applying best practices, thinking about local solutions, engaging with what other communities have done, and helping to bring together, in this case, experts and consultants around anchor impacts. So we are going to be bringing to the table in this particular engagement, anchors, individuals who have expertise and how anchors can best engage around some of these issues. And so again, our hope here is to engage with your community partners to advance and explore some of these solutions over that 18 to 24 month period. And so this is, again, a big time commitment from communities. So we want you to think about that as you're thinking about applying. We are really asking for a point person who is going to be engaged and committed throughout that time. And that is really essential to being a research and action lab partner. For those of you who are here who have been a part of a lab in the past, you know what that commitment looks like. We do have regular convenings throughout the course of the lab. And we are asking you to come to the table and help us think about those convenings, think about how we're defining these problems, and explore together how we're defining the solution. So this year, we are really particularly focused on the challenge around workforce. And I could not think of a better time for us to be solving for this challenge. We know that we are in a really unusual labor market, and a labor market that has been somewhat tumultuous, and that anchors are some of the largest employers in their regions. Yet many of the anchor institutions we speak with and Deborah speaks with on a regular basis are really facing hiring challenges. So again, thinking about your higher education institutions and hospitals that are major employers in your region, but are struggling to find talent, struggling around training, struggling around upskilling. So we are also interested at the same time in research we've been producing at the Philadelphia Fed, focused on those individuals without four-year college degrees who are struggling to connect with quality jobs. So if any of you have read research from my colleague Keith Wardrop, he does some excellent research on opportunity occupations, occupational mobility. We bring a lot of those lenses to the table to say, who do we know that is not benefiting from these anchor institutions? Who is really struggling in this labor market to connect to those upward mobility opportunities? So this pilot this year that we are launching, the Anchors for Equity project, is going to ask you as applicants to think about focusing on a workforce program. And so those programs might be connecting residents to education and training so they can get jobs available at anchor institutions in the region. We really want to challenge you not just to think about the regional economy, but also to think about the anchor institution as the employer, right? What are the jobs that are available at the anchor as well as regionally? We also would challenge you to think about some of those barriers that prevent low and moderate income community members or individuals without a four-year college degree from obtaining those jobs. And then we're going to talk a little bit about exploring opportunities to upskill that workforce. So what are some of the training programs, particularly from anchors in higher education, that could be designed and provided? What are the ways that we could be creating upward mobility for LMI community members and those without degrees? So these are some possible topics to explore, and we're going to talk a little more in detail about the application process and what we're asking of you in that. We are, of course, having this conversation a few months in advance so that you have some time, and Deborah's going to talk about that more. But some of the things we're really interested in and that we think we can bring both research and practice around, the first is hiring. So thinking about employing residents in targeted zip codes, thinking about hiring residents with barriers to employment. We've seen some collaboratives come around individuals who are justice involved, individuals with other specific barriers. Those are just some examples of some solutions your community may want to explore. We're also really interested in questions around upskilling. So if you are an employee at an anchor institution, how are you potentially moving from a lower wage or entry-level job up within that workforce? And how are those anchors really thinking about creating those career pathways internally, both within their anchor institution and potentially beyond, right? To be able to connect to jobs regionally that provide that kind of economic stability and economic mobility. And then finally, we're interested in quality jobs. So we've been doing a lot of research right now around job quality and how we understand that there are workers in this economy who are really struggling to access some of those quality jobs that provide stability and upward mobility. And so thinking about how to improve those access to quality jobs within those anchors, thinking about supports that could be provided for workers, maybe around things like childcare or other barriers, and thinking about how to improve access to quality jobs broadly in the region as well. So those are our kind of general buckets. You may have things that fall beyond those buckets. We are willing and excited to hear them as well. But when we put together this challenge and this collaborative, these were some of the things that Deborah and I identified where we could really bring together our research strengths as well as some of the solutions we know are out there. So I'm going to turn it over to Deborah to tell you a little bit about what's next.
Yeah, so I'd like to just cover in a little bit more detail what the Fed brings to the table and how you will benefit from, as a community, from partnering on this research and action lab. So these are the things that we provide when we work with you. So the first is research. Ashley mentioned this is a strength of the Philadelphia Fed for sure, and the Anchor dashboard, for instance, readily available and has research at the regional level, but we would be able to dig a little deeper with you and look at Anchor impacts at the county or more specific levels. And that's just one example. In addition, Ashley also mentioned the interest in doing qualitative research, not just providing metrics or demographic information, but understanding in a more deep way what some of the barriers are for residents in your community to access quality job opportunities, whether it's at the Anchor institutions or in other areas. So we bring research to the table. Certainly expertise. And in this regard, I guess I'm speaking because I get to toot Ashley's horn here, because her expertise in running 5 of these labs is really significant. And there have been such significant outcomes of the process that communities have gone through. And so the expertise in running the lab for sure, but also the experts and consultants we can bring to the table. So as we've launched the Anchor Economy Initiative, we've engaged already with consultants and experts who have helped communities shape workforce development programs, and we can bring that expertise to the community that we're working with. Facilitation of this process, this design thinking process itself, and then promotion. We provide the opportunity for the community engaged in the lab to have a wider audience for the solution that they're implementing, and for gaining recognition for the kind of work that they're doing. So that's what the Fed brings to the table. But probably the greatest opportunity of the Research and Action Lab is what the community itself is equipped to do. Thanks. So building the partnerships that may or may not exist right now in your community in order to both define and then implement a solution to a workforce challenge is a critical feature of the Research and Action Lab. We seek to increase capacity in your community, both through the experts that we bring, but also just the capacity that comes with working together to address a challenge. Growing trust. I've certainly heard since the launch of the Anchor Economy Initiative, they're often referred to as town gown issues with regard to how anchor institutions can operate with in a community. But even besides that, when we build a table where over a period of 18 to 24 months, the process goes from thinking about the challenge at hand, defining it, and then coming up with a solution to implement, the trust that gets built among the partners at that table is significant. And then obviously the solution itself, the opportunity to solve a workforce challenge that a community is struggling with. I should note here that the Fed doesn't bring funding to the table. While we don't fund a solution, we get you funder ready through all of the steps of the Research and Action. And then turning to, so what will this process entail? This is a call for ideas application. The application is up on Anchors for Equity landing page of the Philadelphia Fed, and I think we'll be putting that link into the chat if it's not already there. And I just want to make clear kind of what will be expected in the application. These are basically the 7 questions that you'll see in the application. It will take some pre-work and community work to apply so that no single organization will be able to go in and just create an application. So you're going to have to talk amongst yourselves to get to the point to be able to apply. We also really invite you to talk to us. Ashley and I, our email addresses are on the Anchors for Equity website. We invite you to reach out to us to discuss how you're thinking about structuring this application, how you're thinking about structuring your community, how you're formulating your challenge, and thinking about what possible partners you want to bring to the table. As I think I said in the beginning, we're asking that one of the champions for the Research and Action Lab be an anchor institution, a hospital or a higher education institution. And you might have another organization that's a community partner or a workforce partner, an employer, really could be a variety of different partners in your community, but one of the co-leads has to be an anchor institution. And I think we can delve into this more as we answer your questions. But let's turn now just to the timing for everything. So today, March 29th, we're sharing information about the Anchors for Equity opportunity. The applications will be due May 26th. We really created that long lead time because we know there will be work in your community and hopefully also in conversation with us before you apply. And then selections, we're looking to select at least 2 communities to work with. They'll be announced by June 16th, and then the process will begin. And I think we have the opportunity to show you, when you go to the landing page, you'll see some background about what a Research and Action Lab is, how this one is a little bit different because it's focusing on anchor institutions and workforce challenge. And then when you go to apply, you'll see we're asking for 2 co-leads, again, one of which is an anchor institution, and then some brief information on what challenge you're looking to address, who will be at the table. Have you already sort of brought them in? What kind of work around workforce has taken place in your community in the past? And we want to learn a little bit more about you and your partners to understand if these are the ingredients for a successful research and action. And that is the application. And I think now we're going to hear your questions and have more of a conversation.
And I'm going to turn it back really quickly to just a couple things I want to call out in the application before we turn it over to you for questions. Again, we mentioned we're really intentional of thinking about equity in this work. So we will ask you in the application to describe how you will engage and include diverse residents. And so one of the things we want to challenge you to think about is, what does that engagement look like? Is it working with a local community organization? Is it potentially surveying workers in your region to understand what some of their challenges are around jobs? Again, one of the things we've been learning is, we have this quantitative data at this sort of larger level, we're bringing it to a regional level, but it really does help to have the community voice included through qualitative research. And Deborah mentioned we don't fund these solutions per se, but we do fund research and engagement, and these are big commitments for us at the Fed to pass this work along. And so we want you to think really, really insightfully about, if we were to bring something in around qualitative research and engagement, how could that be utilized in your community? The other thing I want to pick on that Deborah said here is about that partnership, right? So we mentioned we want to really see one anchor partner and one community partner. And again, collaboration is what makes labs successful. It is all about collaboration and coming together, but we're really hoping you set a broader table than just those champions. So the first real step is trying to decide, what are your anchor or anchors? Could be more than one. We're okay with that. It could be that you have a higher education institution and a hospital that are all really interested in solving for this challenge. That could be a really great anchor collaborative. But we do want to see that community voice as well. So how are the community organizations engaged? Is it a workforce nonprofit? Is it a workforce board? Is it a chamber of commerce? It could look really different depending on your community, but we do want to see one engagement from the anchor institution and one from the community. And that partnership and that collaboration, we really encourage you to also think about, what you need to build that table. And it may not be that it's totally built yet, right? That's part of the capacity we bring to this. But we really want to see, are there employers you'd like to engage beyond those that are at anchor institutions? Are there other community partners that you'd like to get involved in this work? And so that's the challenge we really want you to think about. This partnership and the setting of the table, it takes a lot of work. And we are there to help you with that. And we really want to encourage you to reach out to myself or Deborah and understand what are some of the ways we can help you call in those folks. But at minimum, we need those two partners, right? And from there, we can really start to build the capacity to build that engagement and to build that broader table. And again, we may ask you what research exists. Is it what research capacity exists? Are there people in your community who would be really happy to partner on research projects? Are there people who have some expertise and have done some surveying or qualitative work? And again, also, are there funding capacities? Do you have maybe a community foundation or local funders who might be interested in getting engaged in that? Again, these are things that we can bring to the table to really help move along this collaborative, to move from problem to solution. But we would really like to hear from all of you. Who are the folks that you're talking to, and how can we help you build from that? Yes, so I think those are most of the questions there. I don't know, Deborah, if you have anything else to add in on the questions, but I'm happy to kind of turn it over to the audience if we don't have anything more. Great. So at this point in time, we're going to allow you to unmute yourselves. You are also welcome to ask a question in the chat. So if you maybe don't want to speak up or raise your hand, if you raise your hand, it does help us so we can call on folks. But if you want to ask a question in the chat, we are also happy to read questions from the chat. And again, if you want to learn more about what your community in particular can do, we really encourage you to reach out to us and say, hey, I'm from, I don't know, New York City. You wouldn't be. We do need you to also be in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware in the 3rd Federal Reserve District. I do think I should have mentioned that at the beginning, but that is one condition of the labs. So I see a question here from Carrie Lemon. Is this an in-kind grant opportunity? Are there funds to support the partners who are engaging in local research? So we do provide funding for the research. So there are funds that we have set aside both for the stakeholders we'll be engaging, for the experts that we're bringing in, and for research itself. But there are also some in-kind, right? Which means we will probably bring some of our staff's time and expertise. So the answer, Carrie, is it's a mix of two. And that there are some opportunities for us to say, maybe we want to fund a qualitative study that we do in partnership with some local organizations. And that is something we have done in the past. And then, yes, if you could put the link again. I think, Grace, that is a different link. So I think we might want to put the one directly to the website. I see a hand. I saw a hand. Was that Ramya? Did you have a question there?
Yes, thank you. I'm Ramya Vijaya. I'm from Stockton University. We do have a status as an anchor institution in Atlantic City. We already, as a result of that, we do a lot of programs across the university with the community groups there. But I'm here trying to explore this to see more from the research perspective. As a faculty member, it would be really interesting to merge the research component and provide an opportunity for our students as well. So I'm wondering a little bit, because you mentioned, universities as one of the partners you're looking for. How would you balance the research interests of the university partners and the Fed as the research hub, I guess? I'm not sure if that makes sense. So our interest would be the community work that we're already doing, but really a large part of our interest would be driven by the research experience that we can bring for our students and our institution as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Ashley can speak to some examples from the past, but certainly while the Fed has existing research and research capacity to share, the idea that especially a university partner brings research expertise and honestly research opportunity for graduate students or college students is, I think, one of the great capacity building and benefits of the lab. So if there is a piece of research that's needed as part of the Research and Action Lab process, and the university has the capacity to do that, and we can support the university in doing that, that is a great opportunity. We certainly wouldn't want a university partner to replicate anything that we already have, but I think under local, that's probably unlikely to. Actually, I don't know if you have anything else.
Yeah, and I'm happy to jump in and say, so one of the things that is really essential in our research and action labs is kind of building collective assets, right? And those are both around the research around problems as well as research and elevating solutions. So again, we really, at the Federal Reserve nest ourselves in that research. So we're not coming up with solutions that are just a great idea, we think. We really want to make sure that we're defining problems correctly and defining them with community. But at almost several of our research and action labs, I think some folks who are here who have participated in the past, we do co-author and work on studies together. So in some work we did in Northeastern Pennsylvania, we conducted a qualitative study where a local organization did the qualitative research, where they interviewed transit riders in that case, because we were looking at transportation. So this could be a great opportunity for students to be engaged frontline in qualitative research. We have co-authored a few studies. We did some quantitative research with New Jersey around small business challenges. We made a toolkit with the Delaware State Commerce and Rodel, which is an organization in Delaware, around childcare challenges and solutions. So we do really like to do that with our research and action labs where we partner around research. And again, we're pulling our sort of in-kind expertise and also really being able to work with your institution. I think there is an opportunity there for students if it aligns again with how we're thinking about that problem and how we're exploring solutions. I will say it's great also that you're already engaged in the community and thinking about this. And the other thing I would challenge you to think about is like, who else would you want at that table? And so I know there's some other Atlantic City folks, maybe they're already engaged in this conversation with you. But that is the other piece of it we would love to think about. So yeah. All right, I see. In terms of Philadelphia itself, would the entire city be considered appropriate or smallest community level? Are there sections of Philadelphia, the smallest community level that you have in mind? So we have done a research and action lab with Philadelphia previously, where we worked at kind of the greater Philadelphia area. Again, what we're looking for are stakeholders to really come together and articulate what is the place you're defining and who are the stakeholders that you want to bring around in that place. So in this instance, it could be, we're going to talk about North Philadelphia and Temple and engage folks around that. We are also looking to build capacity that doesn't exist. And so I will say quite candidly, we know that there are collaboratives that do exist in Philadelphia. And maybe this is not the best place for us to be building that kind of a collaborative if there are already things that are underway. And so our hope also is to be bringing some of that capacity. We are very interested as the Federal Reserve in some smaller and post-industrial cities. And so again, if you are articulating a place where there is a need, where there is not currently a collaborative, that was what we would encourage you to think about. I don't know, Deborah, if you have any thoughts about that in terms of how we're defining place, particularly in large cities.
Yeah, I would just extrapolate from the Philadelphia question to say that it really is up to the community to define the geographic parameters. And that will be driven by the partners at the table, obviously. And the solution also might end up being geographically a little bit different than the partners that you have around the table, right? So it could be that a larger region starts this conversation around a workforce challenge, but through research and conversation, what becomes clear is that there are a few zip codes that you want to focus on, and that's fine too. So the community itself will define the geography of the lab.
Other questions? Everybody's able to see the link now? Yes, Rod.
I just wanted to say, just as remarkable, I was invited by our local workforce development executive director, Mr. Francis Kuhn, by way of our Atlantic County Economic Alliance with Mr. Max Lusher. And it's just something that is definitely needed for South Jersey. Atlantic County, is our focal point. I'm a partner with Ideal Institute of Technology and have the pleasure of running a Work First New Jersey program, CWEP, Community Work Experience Program. And so we're working with folks who are, going through the run of the mill, if you will, receiving government subsidies. And our, mission from our lens is to really move from dependence to independence. And so research opportunities like this to partner with organizations in our backyard will be remarkable. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation today. And the only question I really have in regards to having now this been your fifth experience, Ashley, and how this has gone well for other individuals who you've engaged with. What does the data, how are you seeing that data used on the outcome? Because, from a perspective of when you're doing top-down research, you always want to ensure that that data converts into the end user actually benefiting, from that, hard equity, push, if you will, of work. So how are you guys seeing that now? How valuable is that then to the stakeholders from your perspective?
Yeah, excellent question, Rod. And I love that question. And actually we've done 5 labs and this one will be our 6th or 7th. So I will say we're also looking, we didn't mention this, we're looking for more than one community. And again, we're going to be really intentional with the applications, but we're hoping we can apply some of those lessons learned. So to your question, one of the things I think is really critical is making sure before we create a solution that we're solving for the right problem. And so I'm going to pick up my colleagues in Northeastern Pennsylvania, a few of whom I know are on the call. When we were first starting a conversation about transportation and specifically transportation equity, how do we think about equitable access to jobs? The question was, well, is it too expensive? Or is it just that the buses are dirty or not exciting to use, or maybe we need to make them, more engaging spaces. And so we conducted both quantitative research and qualitative research. And the qualitative research was really critical to our defining of the problem. Because what we learned when we asked transportation users was the cost was not the issue. It was how long it was taking them to get to their destination. And so likewise, when we're talking about jobs and workforce, we may think the issue is a skills gap, and it may be something else entirely. We may think the issue is pay, and it may be actually I need flexibility or I need childcare. So when we start to explore solutions, we don't want to just be informing them from our perspective as researchers, but allowing the community's voice to be engaged in how we think about those solutions. And so having organizations like yours at the table is really critical because you sort of play that role also as that intermediary to say, how are the people you serve on a regular basis engaged in this work? Can they participate in a survey? Would they come to maybe a focus group that a university hosts? Would they help us to make sure that we're defining the right problem so that when we start to explore those solutions are actually working for the people we are trying and intending to serve? So great question. And one of the things we really hope that comes out of this, I will also say, that intentional focus on equity is one of the things we see that makes a really good lab, right? So knowing who it is that is being left out of the economy and really engaging those people in both the designing process and our thoughtfulness about our solutions. We have also had many solutions so far that engage anchor institutions. And so this is, coming to us from our practice with Research and Action Labs is knowing anchors are committed to their region. They are there as hospitals, as higher education institutions, just like our colleague from Stockton said, already invested and already engaged. And so our hope is really to build that capacity. Great question.
Thanks so much.
And we hope to get more workforce serving organizations like that into the mix. So if you're a higher ed or a hospital listening and you're thinking, what could make our application great? How could we really, leverage our strengths? Getting those voices engaged at the table is also excellent. Okay, so I see a question here from Zakia. Hi, Zakia. Could or should the workforce challenges focus on specific industries or sectors or be broad-based across multiple industries? Great question. So first, I will say we really also want to challenge the folks who are applying to think about the anchors as employers, right? So what are the jobs already that we know that the anchor institutions create or employ at their anchor? Now, it may be, if you're talking about an anchor institution that is, say, healthcare, that you are going to focus on a specific sector. It could be that you're going to focus on a few jobs across an anchor institution. It could be that you're going to think about sort of regionally, where do we see those quality jobs are? So I do think some solutions do lend themselves well to being sector specific or industry specific. But again, you give the example of technology. Technology is a really critical skill set in a whole host of jobs. And so if that's something that you think you might be forming a solution around, and I know your expertise with the Tech Council might lend itself well to that, that really allows a group of anchors and employers to come together and have a shared solution. So I think my answer is, yes, we do see a lot of opportunity if you're focused in on a particular sector, but that isn't necessary when you come in for the application. That may be something we come to through the process of the engagement. I don't know, Deborah, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree with everything Ashley responded. I guess I would also say that this is the value of the table to get set through the partnership and the partners themselves, because I think one thing that is critical about this particular lab is that those at the table are solving for a workforce challenge that actually exists, right? And research is part of uncovering that, but so are the organizations, community organizations that represent residents and also employers at the table. And so I think, especially when we think of post-secondary anchor institutions, colleges and universities as potentially being the training partners for whatever workforce challenge gets identified, really want to make sure that we're looking at opportunities that are significant enough in a community to move the needle. So having one or two employers in a particular industry sector might not be enough to sort of merit a solution that's focused on those two employers. So that's part of the reason of having sort of a significant number of partners at the table to hash that out. Does the geographic area need to be in the 3rd district? Yes. So the 3rd district is most of the state of Pennsylvania, the entire state of Delaware, and southern New Jersey. I think there is a link to a map of the 3rd district on the Research and Action Lab landing page, so you'll be able to see if your community is there.
And unfortunately, for this particular engagement, we really do want to engage with communities that are in our 3rd district. We are very happy to share lessons learned. One thing I will say that we have not shared here is, again, we're looking at more than one community. So there's also an opportunity to learn from one another. So I'm going to pick on Max because I know you have done some engagement with us before, although you were not a lab partner, where we shared lessons learned around transportation across counties. And so likewise, even if you are out of the district, if you're doing something interesting or you're interested in learning, there's other ways to engage. But for the sake of this application, we are asking for the chosen lab partners to be within the 3rd district. And Kate, hi.
Hi, Kate Carrazzo. I'm based here in Philadelphia with the West Philadelphia Skills Initiative. My question is, would it be a good kind of framing to push forward larger problems and questions that we've already been working on with partners, and to use this as like a catapult to really do it? Or should this be like a brand new, we're just getting started type of conversation, or either?
Yeah, I would say either. I mean, I think if a community presents, we have a really interesting solution, and our challenge is to scale it up, right? It's just too small to move the needle in our community. That could be a great proposal. Similarly, somebody could be starting from scratch and saying, we really need to address this, and we need a solution from scratch. I think one of the opportunities we see in having two labs going concurrently in different communities is that communities that could be at different stages are coming to the table with something like very embryonic or something a little bit more, to go with the metaphor, like fully birthed, that, really we just need to sort of like grow up and raise. So, I think that is one of the great opportunities that the community is potentially learning from each other as well. And again, similar to the geography, this could be what the partners at the table see as the greatest opportunity in participating in the lab.
And I have a follow-up, if you don't mind, if there's not another question. Great. So this is around workforce, absolutely. But does it have to be, so from kind of the presentation, right? If the main question is how might we work with anchor institutions to improve labor market conditions? And then again, under quality jobs, there was a bullet that said providing supports for workers. And that was like a bullet under a thing, right? But if that is the main kind of question, is that okay? Or should something like supports be a bullet of a project?
I would say, in that case, I mean, the bullets there, that list is sort of our broad ideas of things we've seen people being, again, that is not a only limited to the things on that list. There may be problems you're solving for beyond that, but supports for workers is a really big problem, right? And so if this is, let's say we're engaging anchor institutions and thinking about, I'm picking on a support, but like how they're providing, childcare access for employees, right? That's a very big problem to be solving for. It is still solving a workforce challenge. It may look very different from the challenge another community is solving for, but we're still learning together about how you're engaging anchors, who you're working with in the anchors, how do we bring that community voice into the conversation? It is not a bad thing if it is just one of the bullets within that. But I would just want to make sure that you're clear on what are the other partners that need to be engaged to solve for that challenge. And I know the work that you do, Kate, so I'm sure you are already thinking about that ahead of the game. Yeah. Other questions for folks? And again, I'm going to pick on Alex's question here. If you are not in the 3rd Federal Reserve District, but you still want to learn from, hear about this work, there are other engagement opportunities. If you apply and are not chosen, there are other engagement opportunities. We are aware that we are a limited capacity to only be able to really engage with a couple of communities on this. And that is still probably a lot for us. But we do want to think about other ways to keep engaged around this. So I would encourage you, if you are curious, even just to learn more. Let's say you're listening today and you are tuning in from California and you're like, listen, I know I can't apply, but I want to learn about what you're learning. Reach out to us. We would be really happy to hear about what you're doing, about how you're thinking about this. We're very happy to share lessons learned. This is really our first pilot initiative for our research and action labs at this intersection. And we're really excited to think about how we can hear from best practices from those of you who are doing this well and share the lessons we learned for others who are just starting on this journey.
I guess I would also, if there aren't other questions, make a plug for using Ashley and me as sounding boards in this process. Again, we built in 2 months before the applications are due because we assumed that deciding to make the application, putting in the time and effort to do that, and gathering your partners together might mean more than just listening to participating in a webinar one Wednesday afternoon, that it might involve more conversations with us before you make that investment, or after you've agreed with your partners in your community to apply, you might want to ask us some questions as you fill out the application and answer those questions. And so we're here for that. We're anticipating that our calendars will fill up over the next 2 months with some of these community conversations, and we really encourage you to email us to put those conversations on our calendars.
Yeah, and I'll double down on what Deborah says. We approach the work of research and action labs as the Philly Fed, not assuming that we have all the answers, right? These are why these are community driven and why we are trying to really think about how we engage stakeholders all the way from your anchors to your workforce organizations to the workers themselves. So if you have ideas or thoughts or things you're exploring, we want to learn from you as well. Again, this is why it is a process and not a product. We are really here to help you engage through that process, to bring experts to the table, to learn from best practices, to hear about what others are doing. Deborah mentioned this one of the benefits is promotion. And I kind of feel like we understate that sometimes, but as the Federal Reserve being able to say, this is a really important economic challenge we're solving for, we have found that can be extremely helpful for our research and action labs and the work we're doing. So I encourage you to reach out to us and say, here's a thing we've been working on. Here's a question we have. Again, maybe it's not at the phase where you see this as the engagement. Maybe you don't think your community has that capacity for the 18 to 24 months. I will say from experience, we really want to make sure that you at each of those key champion partners have a person on staff who is committed, and it does take time. It's a big time and commitment for us. It's a big resource for commitment from us. So we are really asking for you to come to the table as thoughtful partners, willing to spend that time and to put that energy into convening, thinking about who to bring. You can also reach out to us and say, hey, I'd really like to bring this person to the table. Do you know anyone there? So there are some conversations we're happy to have as you are leading up to that application process. But I think the most important step is really starting to reach out to others in your region so you can really build a compelling application. Other questions, other thoughts? Like, please come talk to us. That's the big thing. We do require anyone who applies for the webinar purposes has watched this webinar, whether they attended today or watch it later. And so we are encouraging you, again, if you are reaching out to folks for the first time, if you want to share this webinar or other resources, please reach out to us and let us know. We will have it posted shortly in a little bit, not right away, on our website. But again, most of those resources are already there on that landing page that was shared in the chat, and we are happy to connect and speak further. Great. Any other questions, comments? Wonderful.
Well, thank you, everyone. As you can see, I think Grace put the, if you scroll up, she put the link to the landing page again in the chat. We encourage you to explore that, start talking in your communities to potential other partners, and talking to me and Ashley about whether you're going to apply for Anchors for Equity.
And we look forward to hearing from lots of you and meeting with you. And thank you so much for spending this time with us. And honestly, for your commitment to this work. You're here for the same reason we are, which is that we really care about this work, about fostering more inclusive economies. So thank you for all that you are already doing. We are so excited to hear from you and learn more about how we might partner. So thanks, everyone.